All right, get ready, because today we're going deep into the world of permaculture
Permaculture.
with Bill Mollison's
Yeah.
Permaculture Design course.
It's a good one.
This PDF is intense.
It's a big one.
So many years of observations and ideas all packed in, and we're going to extract the best parts for you.
The good stuff.
Yeah, the stuff that'll change how you see the world.
It's all about connecting the dots, like
Yeah.
forests, water, cities.
Yeah,
And how to work with nature, not against it.
exactly. And, with everyone talking about carbon these days,
Mm-hmm.
I was really struck by how Mollison, even back then, was worried about dying forests.
He did not hold back at all.
Wow.
He said something like 12,000 billion tons
Wow.
of carbon dioxide every year just from dying forests.
Yeah.
And it's not even just the carbon. He talked about how all the waste from forest products is actually a problem for the ocean.
Wait, really? I thought that was more of a plastic thing.
Well, that too, but Mollison, he pointed this out, this hidden problem, how the seabed in places like the Baltic and Mediterranean, even off the coast of New York,
Wow.
is basically covered in this waste.
Oh, wow.
And it's turning into these oxygen-consuming zones.
That's a scary thought, and it really shows how everything's connected, right?
Yeah.
If our forests are messing with the oceans, what else are we missing?
Exactly. And he didn't start there.
No.
He also got into forest pathogens,
Right.
which have been taking out entire species since the 1920s.
Yeah, it's like this domino effect.
Mhm.
One thing leads to another, and the whole ecosystem is weaker. He gave that chestnut blight example.
Yeah, the chestnut.
Killed, 80% of the chestnut trees? Just imagine losing that much of a key tree.
Huge impact.
Huge.
And he noticed this pattern. Trees with the biggest leaves, like chestnuts, elms, and even now beeches, oaks, and conifers seem to be the most vulnerable.
I wonder if it's something about the leaves themselves, the big ones, that makes them easier to get sick.
Interesting thought.
But then he goes after something I didn't expect at all. Highways and cities.
He was pretty straightforward about it.
Yeah.
He saw them as a big problem for soil loss,
Interesting.
especially because they're often built on the best farmland.
Yeah, it's like we're paving over the good stuff.
Exactly.
So then we have to use even more energy just to grow food on what's left.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it is.
But, he wasn't all doom and gloom.
Right.
He had ideas about what to do about it.
Yeah, what did he actually suggest?
Well, he called it design for permanence.
Okay.
Basically, designing things to be as resilient as nature.
I like it.
So yeah, prioritizing forests, but also things like permanent pastures,
Okay.
ponds, and no-till agriculture.
Interesting.
He even talked about using rainwater from roofs, picturing settlements as networks of tanks.
So he's reframing how we think about water
Complete.
instead of it being a problem to manage.
Yeah.
It's a resource. And that's where his key line idea comes in, which I have to say really changed how I think about water on the land.
It's a game changer.
Yeah, okay, so what is this key line and why is it so important?
Okay, so imagine a slope, right? The key line is the spot where the water starts to spread out instead of just flowing straight down.
Gotcha.
It's like a natural contour line that shows us the best places to collect water.
So by knowing the key line, we can design swales and berms and stuff to capture that water.
More efficiently.
Right, so we're working with how the water naturally wants to move
Exactly.
instead of forcing it to do what we want.
You got it. And it's not just digging ditches randomly.
Right.
It's about careful observation and placement based on that key line.
Okay.
He had this great analogy. Treat the land like a roof and tank.
Okay, I like that. Explain that.
Your roof is like the non-agricultural land,
Okay.
and the tank is your garden or orchard.
Mm-hmm.
You use swales and other techniques to move the water from the roof where it's not needed
Right.
to the tank where you want it to soak in.
So it's all about getting that water into the ground instead of letting it run off and cause erosion.
Yeah. It's pretty clever when you think about it.
Yeah, it makes you think about how much we waste water in our conventional systems.
For sure. And we're just scratching the surface here.
I know, right?
Mollison goes even deeper into how to make the soil hold more water.
Okay, hold on. Before we go too far, I want to know what really stood out to you in this first section. What's going to stick with you?
Honestly, it's that whole perspective shift on water.
Okay.
It's not just about catching it, it's about making the whole landscape act like a sponge.
Right, soaking it up and releasing it slowly.
Exactly.
That's a long-term solution, not a quick fix.
And it's so important for building resilience, especially with climate change and all.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it goes beyond just our gardens,
Yeah.
thinking about those dying forests and how they're affecting the ocean.
Yeah.
Mollison was way ahead of his time on that.
He really was. Okay, let's dive deeper into this water stuff. What else did he have to say about working with water on the land?
He was really into dams and ponds,
Okay.
but not those huge ones that mess up the ecosystem.
Right. He likes smaller, strategically placed ponds.
Yeah.
I remember him talking about a series of ponds on lower slopes to catch and store the water.
Exactly.
Like a chain of little reservoirs all working together.
He described this really cool multi-zone system
Okay.
where water flows from like the clean collection areas
Right.
to the nutrient-rich areas,
Right.
then to marshes, and eventually back to the stream.
Wow.
So you get this cascade of different ecosystems all linked together.
And each zone is doing something different, supporting different life.
Exactly. It's brilliant design.
Yeah, it reminds me of how he talked about using earth banks to create thermal belts to protect against frost.
Oh, yeah. And he suggested planting bamboo on those banks for added benefits.
So every element has multiple functions.
Multitasking to the max.
That's amazing. Okay, I'm picturing this incredibly diverse landscape, all powered by water.
That's the idea.
But let's shift gears a bit.
Sure.
What about those arid landscapes he was so fascinated by? I always thought of deserts as, well, just deserts,
Yep.
barren and unproductive.
Most people do, but Mollison saw things differently.
Okay.
He noticed these unique things about arid landscapes, like receding scarps.
What are those?
They're basically cliffs that erode over time, leaving those cool rock formations.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then you have wadis, those dry riverbeds that flood sometimes after it rains.
So it's not completely dry, just dry most of the time.
Exactly, and Mollison saw that as an opportunity.
Because after it rains, everything just explodes with growth.
Yeah, it's like the desert comes alive.
He gave the example of pinyon pines
Yeah.
in the American Southwest.
Yeah.
They produce tons of pine nuts in good years.
Right, Native American tribes used to rely on them as a staple food.
It's amazing that these harsh environments can be so productive.
If you know how to work with them.
Okay, so what were some of his key strategies for arid landscapes?
Mulch was huge, for one.
Mulch,
It helps prevent those pH spikes in the soil after it rains.
which can hurt the plants.
Exactly, and of course it helps keep the moisture in.
Right, it's like a protective layer.
He also suggested using high mulch-producing species like tamarisk and casuarinas as windbreaks.
To create little microclimates.
Yeah, and protect the more delicate plants.
Makes sense.
He also talked about the Papago Indians and how they use these guard walls and brushwood to slow down flood water,
Oh, interesting.
to help the water soak into the ground instead of just running off.
It's fascinating how indigenous cultures have been using these principles for centuries.
Mollison was all about learning from traditional knowledge.
I like that.
He even came up with this concept of creating rampancy in the desert.
Rampancy, what's that?
It's about using fast-growing species to kickstart the ecosystem.
To get things going.
He gave the example of prickly pear in North Queensland,
Okay.
which actually helped a secondary forest grow back.
Because it provided shade and protection for other plants.
Exactly. It's all about understanding how ecosystems change over time.
It's like jump-starting the whole process.
But Mollison didn't just focus on continents.
Right.
He was also really into islands.
Islands. Wow. Okay, now we're really going off the beaten path.
He saw islands as constantly changing, some more permanent than others.
Okay.
And he talked about the challenges of fresh water on islands, especially those low-lying ones where the water table is right on top of salt water.
So if you use too much fresh water, the salt water comes in.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
It is.
And he made this point about how humans have actually played a big role in establishing large trees on many islands.
Like coconut palms.
Exactly. He suggested they wouldn't be there naturally without human help.
It's a good reminder that humans have always been shaping these ecosystems.
Sometimes for the better, sometimes not.
True.
Speaking of shaping, he also talked about this technique called platen smashing.
Platen smashing, what is that?
It's basically a way to create planting sites on coral outfalls. You break up the hard coral surface to make pockets for planting trees.
Oh, interesting.
And then you create these magical ring gardens.
Magical ring gardens. Are you making this up?
I swear it's in the book.
Okay.
You make these circular gardens by breaking up the platen, piling up the sand around the edge,
Okay.
filling the center with mulch, and then planting a single drip irrigation system in the middle. Waters everything.
So you create these little oases of fertility.
That's the idea.
What else did he say about islands?
He was a big fan of mangroves.
Those trees that grow in salt water.
Yep, he suggested using them to extend islands into lagoons.
Wow.
And he mentioned specific plants that could handle the waves and wind.
So it's about using the right plants in the right place.
But also using plants to actually change the environment itself.
That's powerful stuff.
He even suggested trying to plant coastal species in deserts and vice versa,
Interesting.
just to see what would happen.
Pushing the boundaries.
But beyond specific ecosystems, Mollison also started talking about this broader idea of yield.
Yield.
And it wasn't what I expected.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What was his take on yield?
Well, it's about these boundaries,
Okay.
where different ecosystems meet, like the edge of a forest
Right.
or the shoreline of a lake.
Okay.
Mollison noticed that these edges are often way more diverse and productive than the interiors.
Okay, why is that?
It's like you get this mixing of influences.
Okay.
So you have plants and animals from both ecosystems kind of interacting,
Right.
creating more niches for different species to thrive.
So it's more than just variety. It's like, what, more interaction, more possibilities?
Exactly. He said that reefs are a really good example.
Right.
Super rich.
A veg.
Yeah, where the ocean meets the coral, there's just this explosion of life.
So if edges are so productive,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean we should create more of them?
That's what Mollison thought. He said we should design for beneficial edges
Interesting.
to get more yields and more biodiversity.
Okay.
And he wasn't talking about just straight lines.
Right.
He wanted us to copy nature.
Okay.
Create those wavy edges, those interwoven edges.
Yeah, to maximize the surface area.
Exactly.
Where those different elements interact.
Yeah, so it's not just about what's happening on your property.
Right.
It's about how it interacts with everything around it.
It really is a different way of seeing things.
It is.
And Mollison didn't stop with just plants and landscapes. No.
He thought animals were really important, too.
Animals?
Yeah.
I always thought permaculture was more about plants.
Well, he saw them as allies, not just livestock or pets.
Mm.
He said that a lot of animals that we think of as pests
Okay.
can actually be helpful.
Like what kind of pests are you talking about?
Well, he really liked pigs.
Pigs. Okay, I can see how they can be good for tilling the soil.
Yeah.
But I also imagine them just destroying a carefully designed garden.
Yeah. He knew that you had to manage them,
Right.
but he also pointed out how good they are at foraging
Mhm.
and cultivating,
Okay.
and how they can get rid of certain weeds and other pests.
So it's like natural pest control.
Exactly.
Did he have any other favorite animal allies?
He talked about chickens
Okay.
and how you could incorporate them into other animal systems
Hmm.
to use their heat and manure.
Right. And their eggs.
Yeah, and he suggested using native plants for them to forage on.
So it's about creating these integrated systems where everything benefits each other.
Yeah.
What about predators? Did he have any strategies for dealing with those?
He said we should try to design our systems like natural predator-prey relationships, like
Yeah.
creating thorny patches for chickens to hide from hawks.
Right, to give them some natural protection.
Exactly, thinking like nature.
Makes sense. I bet he liked fish ponds too.
He did.
Okay.
He saw them as a good source of food
Mm-hmm.
and a way to control pests. He even talked about using different mesh sizes in the pond
Yeah.
to control which fish can get through.
So it's all about design and management, right?
It is.
It reminds you that permaculture isn't just about throwing a bunch of stuff together.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the relationships
Yeah.
and creating systems that work.
And, even though permaculture is usually associated with rural areas,
Right.
Mollison really believed in its potential for cities, too.
Urban permaculture. That one always seemed kind of strange to me.
Yeah.
How did he see that working?
He had some interesting ideas,
Okay.
like urban-rural land sharing programs,
Cool.
where people from the city can access land in the country to grow food.
So connecting the city and the country.
Exactly.
I like it.
He also talked about working on organic farms on weekends
Right.
as a way to learn about permaculture and
Yeah.
contribute to food production.
I like that too.
And he was excited about city farm initiatives where
Mhm.
people are growing food in vacant lots and stuff.
So seeing the city as a place to grow food.
Yeah, he saw cities as these untapped resources.
Right.
Rooftop gardens, community gardens,
Mhm.
using existing fruit and nut trees.
Yeah, and farmers markets.
Yeah, those are important for
Definitely.
connecting people with local food.
He really emphasized those networks,
She
right?
did.
Building community around food,
Yeah, it's about bringing nature back into the city.
even in small ways.
Absolutely.
What about this urban permaculture stuff stood out to you?
Honestly, it's that idea of the city as a farm. It's
Okay.
such a powerful image.
Yeah.
It makes you see potential for growing food and
Hmm.
restoring nature in places that we usually just ignore.
Yeah.
And it ties back to that idea of community working
Yeah.
together.
It's all connected.
We're all part of the same ecosystem, city or country.
You're right. Okay, I'm feeling inspired. But Mollison didn't stop there, did he?
Nope.
He went beyond the design stuff
Yeah.
and started talking about economics and social structures.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, that's where he's talking about changing the world.
He wasn't just trying to change how we garden or build houses.
No.
He was trying to change how society works.
That's a big vision. What were some of his ideas?
He came up with this idea called trading trusts,
Okay.
which are basically legal structures
Yeah.
to support community projects and businesses.
So like a cooperative business model.
Exactly.
Okay.
He saw them as a way to build sustainable economies
Okay.
that benefit everyone.
Right. People and the planet.
A trading trust could have all sorts of businesses under it.
Okay, like what?
Travel agencies, publishing companies, consultancies, even seed companies.
So diversifying the income streams.
Right, creating this network of businesses.
Interesting.
He talked about using existing government programs
Okay.
and getting funding from both public and private sources.
Interesting.
And he really emphasized creating new jobs within the permaculture world.
So it's not just about growing food.
It's about building a whole new economy.
I like it. Did he have any specific examples? What kind of jobs was he thinking about?
Well, permaculture design, obviously, but also real estate, hardware distribution, things like that.
To support a permaculture lifestyle.
Exactly. And he kept coming back to the importance of networking and communication. Seed exchanges, radio programs, activist organizations, all of it.
Spreading the word.
Yeah, connecting people.
It's a movement.
It is.
Wow, we've covered a lot.
We have.
From forests to islands, deserts to cities.
It's been a journey.
What are you taking away from all of this? What's going to stick with you?
Honestly, it's Mollison's vision for a permaculture-based economy.
Okay.
It's so hopeful,
Yeah.
creating systems that are fair and just that
Right.
help everyone.
And it all comes back to community.
Yeah, collaborate.
Working together.
We need each other.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Mollison's work is amazing.
It is.
Even though he's not with us anymore, his ideas are still alive.
He really changed how we see the world.
And he showed us a way to make things better.
And this deep dive has been a great reminder that permaculture is more than just gardening.
Yeah.
It's a way of life, a way of thinking.
And it's powerful.
So to everyone listening,
Yeah.
go out there and experiment, see what you can create,
This is just the beginning. There's so much more to learn.
and so much more to discover.
Happy growing.